You can feel it around this team right now, and it is not just frustration. It is that strange mix of tension, pride, and disbelief that only shows up when a season starts leaning in directions nobody expected. The Warriors are dealing with a stretch that has gotten messy fast, and the number that keeps hanging over everything is impossible to ignore. Nearly $200 million in talent stuck on the sideline, while Steve Kerr is trying to patch together real NBA minutes with whatever healthy bodies are left. That is why the Omar Yurtseven move says so much about where this roster is at. This was not some carefully planned addition for the long term. This was survival mode. Golden State needed size, needed minutes, needed somebody who could step on the floor right away, and they brought in a big who was basically learning names on the fly. Against New York, you could see the adjustment in real time. The rebounding helped in spots, but the rhythm was off. The reads were late, and in this system that matters, the Warriors do not just ask bigs to stand near the rim. They ask them to think quickly, switch cleanly, understand spacing, and react without hesitation. That takes time, and right now, time is the one thing this team does not have. What has kept this whole thing from feeling completely hopeless is Brandon Podziemski. This is where the story really gets interesting. With Steph Curry out, with Jimmy Butler unavailable, with key scorers missing, Pods has not just filled minutes. He has stepped into responsibility. He is handling the ball more, creating offense, keeping defenders honest, and playing with the kind of edge that makes the front office pay attention. Around the league, this is how money gets made. A young guard gets more touches, the numbers rise, the confidence grows, and suddenly what looked like a nice value piece starts sounding like a major summer decision. If you're a real Warriors fan and want to stay updated on everything happening with this team, subscribe now, because things could get interesting very soon. And that is the part people in the Bay are already debating. The Warriors know exactly how dangerous it can be to pay too early or too emotionally. The Jordan Poole situation is still sitting in the background whether anyone wants to say it out loud or not. Podziemski has value, real value, but the question is what kind? Is he a long-term pillar next to Curry's final years and beyond? Or is he a smart, tough, productive player thriving because the roster is held together by tape right now? That answer changes everything, because once you start talking about a big extension on top of Steph, Draymond, Butler, Porzingis, and Horford money, you are talking about a payroll that can trap a franchise in place. The mood around the Warriors is not panic yet, but it is definitely not calm either. Fans see the fight from the younger guys, and they respect it. They also know this team was built to chase something bigger than moral victories in March. The next stretch is going to tell us a lot about how serious this group still is and how aggressive the front office is willing to be when the summer gets here. Right? Curry deserves another run. If you believe this franchise still owes number 30 one more real shot, because the way this is heading, the next move might end up telling us more than any injury report. There is another layer to this that makes the whole situation even heavier, and it sits right in the front office. Mike Dunleavy Jr. is not just looking at a medical report and hoping bodies come back. He is staring at a roster that was built to win now, while also trying to protect the years right after Steph. That is a brutal balance. Every team says it wants to compete in the present and prepare for the future, but very few have to do it while carrying this much salary, this many veteran expectations, and this little margin for error. One wrong contract, and you are not just hurting next season, you are closing doors before they even open. That is why Podziemski's rise has people split in a very real way. On one side, you have fans watching a young guard who plays hard every night, rebounds above his size, makes smart reads, and never looks scared of the moment. Those players matter, especially on a team that has spent years leaning on IQ and feel as much as raw talent. On the other side, there is the fear of falling in love with production that came during a crisis. The numbers count. Of course they do. But context matters too. When a roster is missing stars, somebody is going to get extra shots, extra touches, and extra chances to run the offense. The hardest thing for Golden State is figuring out how much of this version of Pods is permanent and how much of it belongs to the emergency we are watching right now. And while that debate keeps getting louder, the emotional center of the whole story still comes back to Steph Curry. That is the piece nobody can dress up or soften. As long as Steph is out, every conversation feels incomplete. Every lineup looks temporary. Every good performance comes with that same thought in the background. What would this look like with number 30 out there bending the floor again? The Warriors can talk about resilience, development, and surviving the storm. But everybody knows the truth. This season only gets real again when Steph is back, and the team can finally be judged as something close to whole. That is also why the next few games are going to be watched with so much tension. Not because they solve everything, but because they can shift the feeling around the franchise. A few strong nights from the young guys and people start believing the team has real depth. A couple of ugly losses, and the pressure turns straight toward the summer. And once that happens, every rumor, every contract discussion, every rotation choice starts feeling bigger than it did a week earlier. This is how things speed up in the NBA. It does not take long for a difficult stretch to become a turning point. If you are the kind of fan who wants the full story before everyone else starts recycling it, this is the moment to subscribe, because the biggest developments with this team are usually not the ones making the loudest noise at first. They build in the background, and when they finally break, everything changes at once. Comment "The Bay still believes" if you think Golden State has another push left in it, because what is coming next around this roster could say a lot more than people are ready for right now. What makes this even more complicated is that the Warriors are not dealing with one simple problem. This is not just about getting healthy and moving on. It is about timing, trust, and whether this roster can still hit the level it was built for before the season starts slipping away for good. Jimmy Butler was brought in to give this team another dose of toughness and late-game control. Porzingis was supposed to add length, shot-making, and a different kind of pressure on defenses. Horford gave them experience and stability. On paper, you could see the idea. On the floor, there has barely been enough time to let that idea breathe. That is where Steve Kerr's job gets uncomfortable. Once those veterans start coming back, he has to decide what matters more in the short term, easing proven players into rhythm or keeping some of the urgency and flow the younger group has created out of necessity. That sounds easy until you remember how sensitive this system is. One player returning changes spacing. Two players returning changes touches. A full rotation coming back changes the tone of the team entirely. And if Podziemski has been finding confidence with the ball in his hands, the coaching staff now has to figure out how to preserve that growth without asking him to disappear the second the stars are active again. There is also a reality the fan base understands better than people outside the Bay do. Championship windows do not usually announce when they are closing. They just start feeling tighter. A missed stretch here, a bad contract there, one injury that drags a little too long, and suddenly the season you thought had time left feels fragile. That is why every update around Steph matters so much. It is not just because he is the face of the franchise. It is because he is still the engine, still the fear factor, still the player who changes what opponents believe is possible the second he crosses half court. Without him, Golden State can fight. With him, they can still make people uncomfortable. Warriors Nation, subscribe right now because the next few weeks could bring some huge news for this franchise. And that is why there is so much attention now on what the front office does next. If Podziemski keeps stacking strong performances, the price climbs. If the veterans return and the team looks dangerous, ownership gets more pressure to keep spending. If things stay uneven, harder questions start coming. Do you double down on this core one more time? Do you protect flexibility? Do you trust the younger pieces enough to carry more of the weight than expected? None of those answers are simple, and that is exactly why these next weeks matter so much more than the standings alone can show. For people who follow this team closely, this is the kind of stretch where the real story starts forming before the national shows catch up. That is why subscribing right now matters if you want the read on where this is heading before the headlines flatten the whole thing into one easy take. The details are where this story lives, and with Golden State, the details usually end up meaning everything. Right? Experience wins games if you still trust what this team's veterans can bring when the pressure gets high, because the next piece of this story could shift the entire mood around the Warriors again. And maybe that is the clearest way to read this whole moment. The Warriors are still standing, but now the pressure is real. The injuries exposed how thin the margin can get, Podziemski's rise created a serious summer question, and everything still circles back to whether Steph returns with enough time for this team to become what it was meant to be. That is why the next update, the next game, and the next decision all feel bigger than usual. Comment "I still believe in the Warriors" if you think this group still has one more strong push in it, and subscribe right now, because this is exactly the kind of stretch where one piece of news can change the entire conversation overnight, and when that happens, you will want to be here before everyone else catches up.